CFB Paint back, week 0 recap, week 1 preview, Heisman predictions. A lot to cover. And Corey, give me your response to week 0.
Well, I said last week that Norvell was the best coach in the ACC. He was not the best coach even in Ireland this last week. He got outcoached. They got outplayed. I thought that they would win that game, but they didn't. Honestly, I'll be very frank. A lot of Florida State played soft, first of all, but a lot of coaching decisions that were just like, what? And so we'll talk about it in a little bit. But yeah, that's my one take. Norvell didn't step up to the plate.
Oof. So those are some hard words. My big response was, well, I mean, agreed. We'll talk about that game in a little bit more detail, but just on the whole, man, it is like every time I watch a football game where there is a team that is not expected to do much and they hold their own against a much better opponent and sometimes, in some cases, win. It's almost like Moneyball, where he's like, how can you not be romantic about baseball? That's me with college football. Because, like, New Mexico, I mean, the return of Bronco Mendenhall to the sidelines, they get all that they need. They get defensive touchdowns. They're playing well. The team is playing hard. The offense looked surprisingly sharp for it being, a new coordinator first game. And I don't know. It was like I was a little disappointed they gave it away at the end because they had played so well.
Massive drops. Two massive.
I know. But still, like them and even Nevada going toe to toe with SMU was like, man, it's so fun to get behind a team, especially the ones where it's like I don't really know anything about these guys, but boy, do they play hard. Like,
well, and then you had Florida A&M and Norfolk State. Norfolk State, I think, was up.
I'm yet to see it, but yeah.
Yeah, I tuned in on the last quarter and a half or so when FAMU kind of took over, but Norfolk State went down the field and scored, and then couldn't convert the 2-point conversion to win the game.
Well, yeah, I love it. The sport. Every time I think like, oh, okay, this is too much change, like I watch the games and it just pulls me right back.
I'll be honest, I'm still not a fan of these quick games, but I mean. That's part of the reason I actually gravitate towards college football rather than pro. And originally is like, I like the game not to be in the 20s. I want to be in the 30s. I feel like you see who's actually a better team as the game goes longer.
Yeah, I'm with you on like total number of possessions and total number of plays. I preferred kind of college football from about 5 years ago, right? Where it's like, if you're doing things right, you could make 80 snaps on offense or something like that.
Exactly.
So I agree. Like that part I like or liked preferred better. But yeah, let's jump into it. Let's go ahead. Week 0. I think really the only game that we really need to break down in any real detail is the Florida State Georgia Tech game from Ireland. Anything to add to your?
Oh yeah, like Georgia Tech was the better team there. They were more physical. They were willing to take it on the offensive line, and they were taking it on the defensive line. Like they were just a more physical team. And Florida State looked soft. And there were 2 other coaching decisions that were so, in my opinion, asinine. I guess like you run a great first drive as Florida State, and all of a sudden at the very end of the drive, Georgia Tech loads the box, and DJ Lundy checks out. Checks out of the play, and they hit it totally for a 28-yard touchdown out of the backside. For the rest of the game, though, you face 7, 8, 9 players in the box, like a ton of players in the box. You're getting, cover 1, cover 0, like on the outside, and you don't throw the ball hardly at all deep until the very end of the quarter when you're just trying to get a few yards and hopefully you can get a field goal. And then towards the end when you actually finally start attacking the middle. The other terrible coaching call in my opinion is who you played as your linebackers. Like DJ Lundy, everybody's kind of touted like, oh, he's going to be good. He looked okay. To be honest, he did not look great in my opinion. But you also started Omar Graham, who if you watched play after play, he got 36 plays or something like that. He would crash in every single time, and they're pulling out. It was his job to set the edge on so many of those plays, and he would just get sucked in the middle. and it would open up for everything. Um, my kind of like, what are you thinking? Is why don't you play Blake Nicholson and why don't you play Juice Cryer? Juice Cryer got 0 snaps in the game, and Blake Nicholson got 18, and in those 18 he had 2 tackles for loss. Like, I mean,
Guy makes plays. Yep.
yeah, and so like I completely understand that you would have these guys are relatively young. They're both sophomores. They but they are better athletes. And if you're going to already have problems from Omar Graham, which reportedly from everybody that is familiar with the Florida State program, he is your 4th or 5th linebacker in talent wise, and like should be on the depth chart. So why is he playing that much? Why is he in there that much? That makes no sense to me. Did you think he the only one that could run Haynes down? Well, if he's running in the wrong direction, he can't run Haynes down. So I mean, that was the other thing. The other thing is Brent Key let Florida State play right into him and say, hey, we're going to dare you to pass the ball. And Florida State didn't do it. Florida State didn't pass the ball. And Brent Key decided, all right, we'll take the win. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to rehash too much of what you said. Ditto on a lot of it. The thing that I was surprised is the amount of ire that was thrown DJU's way. Like there,
Yeah.
I think, are 3 or 4 plays. It's like, all right, he probably wants that one back, right?
The deep ball wasn't on as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So you missed the one to Ja'Kai Douglas, but that's really the only one, right? Like that's the only one where it's like he's open and he's flat out, just like there's no chance of that.
I would say even the other, like towards the end, the deep balls just weren't semi-accurate. Like it's like you don't even have a shot to get it. So
fair. My bigger beef was kind of like you said, where it's like we're not gonna try really a single drop back pass. Like just like it's one thing for that like to not be your strength. It's another thing to abandon it entirely, where the defense doesn't even have to worry about it. So that was concerning to me. The physicality on both lines of scrimmage, completely agree with. Brent Key, I'll take the Georgia Tech side of this because I feel like we've kind of covered the FSU side, or at least from an analysis perspective, spinning it forward. There's probably more we can talk about with FSU, but like Georgia Tech, I think we said this on the last pod. I thought this would be a close game. I thought this would be a war, and they take on the mentality of their coach. Coach is a former offensive lineman. And you know, I mean, we used to joke and clown about that Miami game, but they fight till the end, right? And they just play in and play out. We're like you said, we're more physical than FSU, and it's really they have a tough schedule. So I'm not going to overreact to what they can do, but at this point, it's like, hey, there's maybe one game that I think that they cannot win against Georgia. And it's mostly because it's on the road. Like
and you were close last year, although it was
that was at home, and that's kind of what I'm baking in there. Is like, all right, there's probably a little bit, you know, it's a different environment going into Sanford Stadium between the hedges rather than playing at Bobby Dodd. But for Florida State, like my thought was kind of like the opposite, where it's like, okay, it's not that you lost, it's how you lost that makes me pretty concerned about what will play out the rest of the year.
And I think you kind of nail on it. Like, what is this? Is this a representation of the team in the whole? What did they change? What did they take away? Are we going to overreact to a week one, or is this really who they are? And to me, I've gone back and forth. I do think that there was a mentality like that the players didn't attack. If you watch the game again, I felt like in the third and the fourth quarter, Florida State's defense started to attack. But by that point in time, Haynes King had already had them so confused by they ran quarterback counter, a bunch in that game, and just to be able to get out of the pocket had him so confused that they didn't know what direction they were Bulls running in, but while they were running in, all of a sudden he was gone out the backside, and that if you watch that drive where they go to score a touchdown, I think it's to tie it or no to take the lead by 7.
Yeah, 21-14. Yeah,
Florida State does a good job of containing him and doing not containing him, but keeping Georgia Tech at bay until 2 different plays. Haynes King breaks on the outside and hits a guy in the flats, and then they have the run up the middle where Haynes King kind of goes everywhere.
The draw, yeah.
You have these. You were right there. You started to get there, but the dynamic, the unplanned for of Haynes King was what made the difference in that game, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. So again, exciting if you're a Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket. I think there's brighter days ahead. They're recruiting really well. Again, I'm a fan of Brent Key. I think he's a good coach. Um, his coordinators had a great game plan. It'll be exciting to see what they can do going forward. They do have a pretty tough schedule. They host Miami. They go on the road to Georgia. Do they play Clemson? I can't remember.
Don't
Um,
recall off the top of my head.
no worries. But anything else from week zero? That was pretty much it from me.
I just enjoyed having a bunch of games that were close towards the end. Like even games that I was not necessarily didn't have a dog in the fight. I mean, Florida State, Georgia Tech goes to a field goal. New Mexico and wow, Nevada, right? No, Nevada
I
New Mexico,
mean,
and yeah, they all go down to like the fourth quarter though, and then
yeah.
Fam and Norfolk State like all go down the fourth quarter. It was just kind of enjoyable. Like if you don't have a dog in the fight, at least the game's good.
Yeah, entertaining and easy to pick one and just start to pull for them in a close game. No, for sure. And let's maybe spin this ahead to week one, and let's talk through just a handful. Look, I threw down a couple in our little text of ones that we may want to cover. And again, we don't need to necessarily go into a ton of detail, but just week one this year, I remember. I think it was last year. We were like, yeah, week one's kind of meh, you know, and you had to wait till week two to kind of get into it. Um, this year, that's not the case. There's quite a few matchups that are interesting. I think right out of the gate. And so I wanted to just like touch on a few. I don't know. Feel free to jump in on some of these if you want to. And the biggest one that I like, I'll stand on my soapbox for just a minute and kind of express some frustration. So Saturday, of course, I'll watch some of the midweek stuff, right? Like I don't want to ignore like North Carolina, Minnesota. I'll tune in, see what Mac Brown's got for us these days. I'll check that out. North Dakota State, Colorado, FCS versus Colorado, the lightning rod of college football at this point. So I'll keep tabs on that one. I don't know. I don't really have any specific analysis for those games. But Saturday, we get started early. Like the noon game, Clemson, Georgia, is awesome. Um, my beef is that Penn State, West Virginia is played at noon. I'm mad about that. And if you're a Mountaineer, I think you're even more mad about it because that environment at night, while your team is still like undefeated, right? Like clean slate. There's no blemishes on the record, and they had a decent. What they go 7-5 last year in the regular season. Like they had a bounce back year. There's excitement around that program, and now you welcome a regional rival. I don't know how many times they've actually played, but I know that they're kind of in the same, you know, obviously the
Yeah, I
same
mean, you go
same
back to the Big
region.
East kind of
Yeah, I think
back in the
yeah,
day.
I guess way back in the day for sure. And Penn State's ranked 8. They've got a single digit next to their name. Like this belongs at night. Like this, we
Well,
should
and
be
you
hearing
need a
country
bunch of drunk
roads.
West Virginia Mountaineers at a game at night. It would make the atmosphere
Well,
so
I
much
think
more
yeah,
fun.
I was gonna say I think you'll still get the people drinking plenty of clear before the game, but yeah, you're right. I just think the night environment would make this one much more interesting. Again, we've been like sort of like not even closet. We've been like Garrett Green fans here, as he's a Childs alum.
You
So
have been hardcore.
I am, and he's kind of just a gunslinger. So he's an entertaining watch. You can say it may not be perfect, but it won't be boring, right? Like, so and again, West Virginia feels like one of those programs that has really had challenges when it comes to retaining their best players from the transfer portal, but they did return. Uh, oh gosh, I'm gonna C.J. Donaldson return Garrett Green. They have a fair amount coming back this year, which in the transfer portal era, I feel like other programs are quick to pluck the best from West Virginia. So I'm excited to see what they could be. And Penn State's got question marks, right? They lose Manny Diaz. He's no longer the defensive coordinator. They lose a pretty significant amount of talent on the offensive line, on the defensive line. New offensive coordinator. How is he gonna revamp the offense? Because it's been pretty bland the last several years. You know, James Franklin has been there forever, but I think that there is some I don't even know what the right word is, but there's probably some uneasiness among the fan base on like what he's going to be able to do, and if he's a long-term solution at Penn State. I'm interested to see that game. Well, sorry. Any other thoughts on that? I know that I was the
Yeah,
one who added
obviously,
that one.
you got Drew Aller, who doesn't turn the ball over, but he also didn't throw the ball down the field. And was that a circumstance of the OC, or was that a circumstance of capability? I'm interested to see what happens with that game and see how this offense is. I'm also interested to see like what's the excitement behind Penn State, because you don't have to play Michigan and Ohio State anymore every year because you're no longer in the division with them. I still think you have Michigan this year. Is that correct? Off the top of my head, I don't know if that's
Yeah,
right.
I think so. I don't think they play I don't think they play Ohio State. They play Southern Cal and Washington
Oh, there you go. You don't even play Ohio
and
State.
UCLA. They get all the easier
Yeah.
version of the Pac-12 editions.
If you're gonna get to the championship game, finally, this is your opportunity, and you gotta. I mean, I know you're starting West Virginia; it's not in your conference, but like, start the season off right. So,
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Clemson, Georgia. Do you have any insight on that or any thoughts on it?
so I go back and forth on this one. I feel like Cade Klubnik made some bad decisions, but he's got another year with his offensive coordinator. He's got an opportunity to be successful. The talk out of Clemson is that the freshman wide receivers are pretty good. I'm a Maffa fan over whoever just left. What's his name?
Oh, I
I
can
don't
see
know who the
him.
running
I
back
can't
is. I
think of
can't
his
think of
name. Yeah,
it. Yeah,
gosh,
Will. Nope, maybe not. Can't even remember right
Shipley,
now. Doesn't
Shipley,
matter.
Will Shipley. Yep.
Shipley. I'm I'm a fan. I was a fan of Maffa over Shipley last year. I feel like Shipley was great the year before that, and they kind of thought he would be the same thing, and he just wasn't as good in my opinion. Um, I'm interested to see if Clemson makes this close and or pulls the upset. To me, this one could go like all over the place. It could be like I would not be surprised if Clemson wins, and I would not be surprised if Clemson gets completely blown out because I do not know what to make of this Clemson team to some degree. I did pick them to win the ACC, and with that picture kind of being painted, like I know we're going to talk about the Miami and Florida game. Like if Clemson loses to Georgia, and Miami loses to Florida, you could have arguably the top three teams in the ACC already with one loss week one. And it's like there's no way in hell an ACC team, two ACC teams are going to get in this championship if that happens. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe this is a little bit of a spoiler. I have no faith in Clemson this year. It's a huge year for them. I think it's a huge year for everyone in that organization. For Dabo at the top, I think you go 9-3 again this year, Dabo, and see like there's going to be more pressure. Some of the resources that you've had will start to dry up.
one of the things that
Two,
I'm interested and concerned about with Clemson is like you had so much bad luck last year. I mean, how many times did you turn over the ball inside your own 20-yard line? Like we
true.
talked about this. Like the odds of that happening are not likely, and so it's like, is the talent that much more diminished? Do you think so? I mean, they've kind of been competing at the same level. They haven't had.
I do. I think. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like you could say that, but what would you say for the 3 years ahead in front of that, where they've out talented everyone and still have found ways to come up short? Um, I, that's the part where it's like I don't know if they get the benefit of the doubt anymore. I just think it's a huge year for Dabo. I think it's a huge year for Garrett Riley, and a huge year for Cade Klubnik. Like a lot riding on this. I think the defense has still been great. Like I've got some questions um, with the defense, mostly because there's just kind of some new faces. Of course, you have some holdovers like T.J. Parker. Does he take the next step? He was a good freshman. You have Barrett Carter in the middle, an excellent linebacker. Who's his running mate? I think the word on the street is that. Oh gosh, I'm going to forget the freshman's name. Sammy something or other. Is playing pretty well. They've got some talent in the secondary, some of it returning, and some new faces there too. I don't know. I think the defense will be fine. I think Georgia's going to win this game though, and I think I mean preview for later, but like that's one of my picks is like Georgia to cover that spread. Like, so yeah, we'll see. That's the nice thing is like hopefully between those two we get one good game. Again, would love to see that West Virginia game played at night. That would be my preference. I mean, I understand like Fox does like the big noon kickoff, but like, come on, like you couldn't put that one like you're putting it up against Clemson and Georgia instead of putting it against A&M and Notre Dame, which again is an intriguing matchup, but like you're probably going to do better against that. Like Clemson and Georgia, they have what 4 national championships between them over the last 8 years or so. Like,
Maybe they're hoping that by the first quarter it's a blowout and you flip over to
and
the
everyone
Fox
moves
game.
over. All right, maybe that works. um, should we switch over to the Sunshine State? I don't know if there's an actual name of this rivalry from at 1:30. Which again, I would prefer this to be a night game in the swamp. Like, what are we doing, people? Um, Florida hosts Miami. Uh, this one, yeah, I'm just excited for. I feel like there's a lot riding on this game for both teams. Both teams have had kind of disappointing starts to their respective coaches' tenures. Now on year three, lots of recruiting battles between the two, and you get this measuring stick game where you can see like where is each program. Again, I think if you were to just kind of poll like the national college football audience, most people would probably say Miami's in a better spot right now than Florida is. Chance for Billy Napier and company to turn this thing around. I'm intrigued by this one just because like Miami has a lot of new faces. They brought in a lot of transfers specifically after the spring, after spring, right, during that second portal window. And so, how do all those pieces fit together? uh, Another thing that I'm excited to see is like Cam Ward. I've been a big Cam Ward fan. You know, he was. I drafted Washington State in our win totals draft 2 years ago because I thought Cam Ward could lead them to something. 5-7, both of his years at starting at quarterback. Now, again, the talent around him at Miami is a lot different, aka a lot better than what it was at Washington State. But I'm excited to see what it looks like. Um, and I just think this is kind of an interesting contrast in philosophies, right? Um, in philosophies from specifically from an offensive perspective, like Miami, Cristobal loves to run the football, but his offensive coordinator is kind of more of a spread background. He's ran the football out of spread formations. They have good personnel both on the outside, but also to run the football. Whereas Florida is like 2 tight ends, a back, and really adamant on running the football, and typically kind of between the tackles or just off tackle. Like they're really, more oriented toward the quick passing game, but running the football is kind of their identity. Whereas Miami has tried to pivot to this more spread type of look, specifically in the last 2 years, as they tried to cater to Tyler Van Dyke, who was then their quarterback, and then brought in Cam Ward, thinking it would be an easy transition for him, given that he's ran similar offenses. I'm just really fascinated to see how this plays out. Right, I don't really know what to make of either of these two teams, and so it'll be fun to see them against one another. Uh, and it's just one that, like, in principle, I would like to see this game played. I don't need it necessarily every year, but like, give me 4 times a decade or something like that, right? Like enough so that they don't go too long without kind of measuring up against one another.
Yeah, Steve, I think you covered a lot of the dynamics of the football field and how the teams are going to play. I want to talk about how it feels to be a fan of each team.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about what this game means. It's going to set the tone for the year. Like, if you're a Miami fan, now, do I really think this game will 100% set the tone for the year? I don't think it does. I mean, I think it's just one game, right? It's not that big a deal. You can change things around. But if you're thinking them from a Miami fan mentality, we brought in all the recruits. We spent millions of dollars on transfers. This is our year. Our schedule's easy. We have the talent. If we blow this to start the year, like, here we go again. Like, we have the talent and we aren't living up to the things. And does that Miami fan base implode? Does that whatever else? It probably doesn't, right? The talent's going to be there, and even if they lose to Florida, because you're going into the swamp. The swamp's not an easy place to play. A little bit easier in the morning than it is at night.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, you're going in there, and if you lose to them, you still have an easy schedule. You still have a way to get the ACC championship. You still can recover your season. But the mentality, does it affect the team? Does it affect the fans? And then from a UF perspective, I think UF fans think that their team's a little bit better than the national media does. I think national media
Yeah.
is like saying, "Oh, you're a 5-win team at most," and they're like, "We could be 6, 7, maybe 8 ish, and we should get into the playoffs if we win 8." I know you're an average team if you win 8, but in my opinion, you already lost to all the good teams. You shouldn't be in the playoffs. But if you lose this game against Miami, oh great, we really are not. We're gonna have a bad season. It's
Yeah.
gonna
Where do the wins come from?
Yeah, it's like, can we beat UCF? Can we? And they should have some wins, and after that, I mean, the schedule is on the easier side at the beginning of the year, and then very very hard at the end. So it's like it's just a matter of whose base is more demoralized by what happens, and whose fan base is more excited. If it's an ugly game, are both fan bases demoralized? If it's a close game, are people okay with it a little bit? But because I mean, the spread is what 2.5, and it favors.
Yeah, surprisingly low, frankly.
So like I'm excited to see this game. I don't know who would win, but I'm definitely tuning in to this one.
Oh yeah, that one's going to be an exciting one. Yeah, as a Florida State fan, one who can kind of take pleasure in either one of these two teams losing, like it's must see TV. And I just I think there's a lot to go with this. Kind of like you said, the attitude of the fans going out of this game, whoever loses is probably going to be crushed, maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but my curiosity is like, does that start to trickle down into the locker room if you start to see that, specifically with Florida, where they are keenly aware of what the win total is and have kind of spoken about it and how they feel disrespected. This is one I think you got to have if you're gonna get the over there. So I'm interested to see that one come.
I mean, honestly, let's be real. If you're going from a pure talents perspective, Florida's the number one. Florida's the most. If you're going from like recruiting, Florida's a higher ranked recruiting team than Miami is, and they should be better, but they haven't generated that into wins. I watched nothing the other day. We talked about how well all the teams were ranked, and or based off their recruiting and the transfers. And I think it had Florida as like number 10 in the nation. It had Florida State as number 12, and then Miami is number 13, which surprised me a little bit, to be honest.
Close grouping, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have to see. Again, like I wonder if some of those uh, transfer pickups from Miami, like again, they might just be the right fit. That it ends up being like, okay, they've got the right roster, and kind of like I said on a previous episode, I think they've almost idiot proofed their roster. Maybe not quite, but this will be a fun one to see. Again, I had Florida losing to Utah 2 years ago when they hosted Utah, and I thought Utah would win going away. And Florida not only hung tough, but they got an interception to seal the deal right at the end of that game. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see what's in store for both of these and how we can spin that forward after seeing them play against one another.
Also, kudos to Florida for scheduling good games to start their seasons. I mean, we've seen Utah back to back. We've seen Miami this year. Like, thank you for entertaining us.
Yeah, UCF is on the docket this year. Like, yeah, they've done a great job. I think they used to take a lot of flack, and I think some of it they still do because they almost never leave the state of Florida for a non-conference game. In fact, that Utah game last year was the first time they'd left the state for a non-conference game, and I can't remember how long. It was some wild stat. I think it was like 30 something years. It was insane. Like, so they mostly like between playing FSU, which makes sense, right? Like, okay, you play that one on the road, but it's still within the state of Florida. But between that and a couple of FCS teams, usually, and their SEC schedule, they never left home to play an out of conference game. Like, never left the state, I should say. Yeah, let's see. I'm gonna scroll through. There was a couple others that we wanted to touch on. Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Yeah, maybe we go with that one next. I don't really have a ton of analysis on this one. Just more so like, hey, Mike Elko, Riley Leonard, the dynamic duo are now on opposite sidelines and both in different locations. Give me A&M. That's really all. I am big on what Elko can do quickly there. I think mostly from a schematics and vibes perspective, how quickly he turned around Duke. I think he can do something similar with A&M, and he has a much better like talent, baseline talent on that roster to do it. So really excited to see what A&M can do. Notre Dame, I just like I don't buy them. And I think I've kind of said this, like, if I'm Riley Leonard, I'm not sure why I went there. Like, why there? Um, I really, like, if I could just ask him, like, why there, like, and get like the honest, not like the, well, I mean, okay, sure, but you can get money anywhere, right? Like, that's the
Maybe,
thing.
maybe not. I mean, Riley Leonard is a running quarterback. He's got an okay arm. He's kind of like a Walmart Tebow. Not me to rude to him, but like he's kind of that. In my opinion, he's not quite as good as Tebow was, where you can carry your team. But that is who he is, in my opinion.
Well, sure. I'm just saying, like, man, who doesn't want that? You could get that. Like, I can name like 15 programs that would be like, he entered the transfer portal with the do not contact, so he clearly already knew he was going to Notre Dame. And I just like, okay, like they run the football well. They have a great defense. Typically, they have a good offensive line. It seems like it might be a little bit thinner this year. There's a lot of hype around the wide receivers, but I'm yet to see it. So I don't know. That's really all I had for that one. That's an exciting one. The Mike Elko era starts off, and again, I think if you're Marcus Freeman, you're the head coach at Notre Dame. Like, this is a year that you got to have it. I think so. If you're A&M, I think you're playing with house money, and anything that happens in this game is gravy. A&M fans at this point are used to like 5-7. So if you do that, Elko, in your first year, no worries. They're going to buy you a top three recruiting class no matter what. It's not till like year like 5, 6, or 7 that they actually start demanding results. But I think he can turn it around quickly. So I'm excited to see if he does.
Yeah, it's not a Duke schedule. It's a much harder than you would have faced if you were like,
True.
but the talent is substantially better. So I'm excited to see what happens. I don't know who I favor in there. I don't know what to make of these teams until I start to see them. One of the reasons why I would ever, if I was ever a betting person, I'd be like, don't bet in week one. You don't know anything really. You know the scouting reports, you know what you think you know, but that's all based on old data.
That is true. That is true. And with the transfer portal, it's just hard to see, like, okay, do it. Number one, am I even familiar with everyone who they have brought in slash lost? Two, how do those pieces fit together? Which I think is
Exactly. Yep.
always a bit of a challenge. I think the last two that we wanted to touch on, um, LSU USC on Sunday, standalone game. Um, LSU's done the standalone Sunday game now 3 years in a row. Florida State twice, and now USC. All neutral site games, right? This one's the most neutral site of the neutral site games, though, I would say. 2 years ago, facing FSU in New Orleans, that clearly favored LSU, like in terms of like just location and ease of travel. Um, and then the return trip to the Sunshine State, where it's in Orlando, not super close to Florida State's campus, but again, you'd think that crowd would kind of skew Florida State's way. And now you're in Vegas, which is again closer to UCLA, yikes, closer to USC. But yeah, very much a neutral setting for this matchup where I don't know what to make of either team's defense, and I feel reasonably good about each team's offense. I think.
Yeah, I kind of along the same lines. It's just it'll be a fun matchup to watch to see what happens to get a feel for these teams to see if this LSU team is going to be as good or better potentially than that last year. I mean, you probably take a step back in quarterback play, but I do know that people that are super high on Usmeyer. So can your defense take a step forward potentially, and you can become um, a team that legitimately contends for an SEC title or not? From a USC perspective, I think the same thing. You have a step back in quarterback play, but can you get your defense to step up a little bit to offset that? Essentially, these record wise, I imagine these probably teams end up probably similar to where they were the year before. But I'm excited to see this, and honestly, I feel like with the talent that LSU is acquiring in these last few recruiting classes, this is a team that you're gonna have to start. If they can put together another season, it's a team you're gonna have to start really worrying about in the SEC.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my one thing, and this is the one hesitation I have with LSU, and I've said it on record. I have to go back and find it on this pod multiple times. Like, they've had awesome receivers, they've had an awesome QB. And I think people are just saying like, oh, it's going to carry over to this new batch, right? And I tend to agree, right? I think Nussmeier's a good quarterback. My problem is with the receivers,
I
right?
know you said
Specifically
that
with
last week.
Kyron Lacey, who drops the football left and right. Like that guy drops the football like it's hot, right? Like to borrow the old Snoop Dogg lyrics. Like I need to see consistent catches from him, and I think losing 2 first-round receivers and a first-round quarterback is going to have an adjustment period. Now, the nice thing is you may have 2 first-round tackles on your team. And Will Campbell, I don't know if you saw his little quote today, playing.
No,
I guess he met with the media today. I'm paraphrasing it, and I'm not gonna get it as good as like he did, but he basically said, yeah, like we're not there to go. We're not going to Vegas to go see, to go to Caesar's Palace. We're there to go get in a fist fight. And he essentially said like something along the lines like, we all understand that, and he even like I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but and maybe it was just in his voice where he's like, I'm making sure our team understands that too, right? Like, which, hey, when you're like probably the best offensive lineman in the country, you can be that enforcer and keep people in line, keep people focused. I like the attitude coming out of LSU. Uh, Concerned about the defense again is just kind of where it stands. And honestly, like I I'm sure Harold Perkins is taken good care of down on the bayou. I'm a little surprised he didn't consider like, hey, why don't I go somewhere where they actually use my strengths? Like, because we saw what 5, 6 games of it at the end of his freshman year. Last year was a dud. Maybe Blake Baker gets that out of him, the new defensive coordinator. Maybe that was what they said. Like, look, we're bringing in a guy who's going to make sure that you're in position to make plays. But yeah, it's that's one that I need to see still. Um,
one more thing about that. If you
sure,
Before we
yeah.
move on, LSU's last three, Saban, Les Miles, Orgeron, yeah, coaches have all won national titles in their first 3 years at the program. We're coming up on the 3 years for Brian Kelly. How close are you to competing for that? How close are you? Because they were willing to wait around when Saban left, right? But Les Miles won, and they stayed with him for a while because he was there. Orgeron, you won one, and then then a year and a half later, you were out or so. Like, how long is this team going to be willing to wait? I mean, you are bringing the recruiting classes, but you had the Heisman Trophy winner last year, and you still can't convert those into championships, into SEC championships, let alone. So we'll see how long they wait on that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I feel like with it kind of in a playoff era, I feel like we probably need to extend out that waiting period just because it's going to be harder to win a national championship because you have to go through a playoff rather than a single game or in the case of the last few years, a semifinal and then the championship game. But I'm right there with you. I think at what point does it start to become something like I'm not comparing him to it, but at some point like Jimbo Fisher bringing in great recruiting classes, but after that, results are required, and so uh, I don't think we're there yet with Brian Kelly, but excited to see what they can do in year 3, and who's ready to step up and fill some of the voids that they have now with a lot of that talented roster from last year gone on to the pros. We want to talk Florida State, Boston College. I don't even know if I threw this one on there.
The only thing I got to say is I'm stunned at that line being at 15.5. I know Boston College's defense is not so.
High, low, or
It seems high to me. Like,
meaning you think it would be closer? The spread would be
yes,
closer
I
between
think
two.
you can
Okay.
move that line down to 10 to 8. Like, you just watch Florida State struggle with a mobile quarterback, and you bring in a mobile quarterback with a pro style offensive coach. I don't know. That's gonna be an interesting dynamic too.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens there. Who knows?
I do think it's a funny thing that like you had the coach there from last year. Like, I don't really want to do this recruiting thing anymore. I'm gonna go to the NFL. And now you have an NFL mind coming back in and you're like, oh, I'll deal with the recruiting and stuff like that. It's like he's been there at Alabama before, but it's a different beast when you're the head coach, I think, than the OC.
And a different beast when you're at Boston College and it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that Alabama
They have the
does. So
red bandana game. They don't need anything else.
yeah, that's about all they have though. Uh, yeah, Luke Kuechly's not walking through the door again. Neither is Mark Herzlich. You know, Doug Flutie. I'm sure I'm Zay Flowers. Anyway, yeah, I think I don't know what to make of FSU at this point. Honestly, like that game and how they lost it is baffling. 15 and a half seems pretty generous, like you said. But who knows? Maybe it's where I think I am prone to overreact to that first game, so maybe I am. But some of the things I saw there were troubling, to say the
Yeah,
least.
Norvell preaches respond and respond and respond, and he talks about how his team has responded in like during the summer and during their fall practices as well. Sorry, the spring and then the fall practices. Like, and that kind of is something. But I'm just wondering, what does Vegas know that we don't? Like, maybe I just think most people would have saw that game and been like, I'm betting that line down for sure. And so
And it's I think they started as a 17 and a half point favorite, so it has been bet down some. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see.
might be
Yeah,
a fun.
I don't feel great. I don't feel great about it. I don't feel great. Again, like it'll probably take a few performances of something better for me to be like, okay, it was a blip on the radar. Right now, uh, I don't know. That's all I can think of with this team is like getting pushed around on both lines of scrimmage.
That's why you don't draw a line with one dot, right? You can go any direction.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. I think the last thing that we really wanted to cover was like Heisman predictions, which I'm going to start with you because I think I can't remember who I selected last year. I remember the first year we did this, I selected Jackson Smith and Njigba, and he promptly got hurt in the first game and hardly played. Um, and I think, yeah, I really can't remember who I chose the next
I don't know who I chose
year.
2 years ago, but I chose J Trav last year just because I thought he was a dynamic and electric player.
Hmm.
And honestly, if Florida State, if he'd played the last a little bit, he might not have been in the running, but it might have been interesting to see what happens because you're an undefeated team. You potentially beat Louisville handily and Florida handily. Like it could happen. His name wasn't up there, but
I mean, if he finished top five, I think. I think he was the fifth in the voting or something
so I'm
like
not
that.
a
So
terrible.
yeah, two or three good, more strong performances could have vaulted him into that race with, especially with the recency bias that takes place with it.
Well, and that's the thing is like with if he were to have the dynamic plays that he did was capable of, you kind of think of those Heisman moments. Jalen Daniels had those Heisman moments, so it makes sense.
Yeah, true.
So you were said you wanted to start with me, or actually what you said is you wanted to start with you, and that's exactly where I want to go is Ewers.
Oh,
That Quinn Ewers is the best player, best quarterback in college football, in my opinion. We've seen a few games where he played rusty, where he was a little hurt, I think, but I think he bounces back. I think he has a coach that is great at setting him up to be successful. The one thing will be to see how they handle the fact that they lost multiple running backs. Um, I think they did actually even bring in a running back like recently. I don't know if he can play this year, but like it was like reported last week. Sorry, just a second, I'm about to cough.
yep. So while you do that, I'll go ahead and kind of respond to what you said. I think you accidentally unmuted, so sorry everyone who's hearing that. Anyway, um, yeah, Ewers is one that I thought about. I just have more concerns with their team.
Yep.
You know, and it is interesting, right? Like the award's going to have to probably be recalibrated with this new era of college football, where I think the likelihood of teams going undefeated or even like 11-1 is now significantly diminished. I think it will become more so. So we'll see how quick voters pick up on that and don't just punish someone for losing. Um,
Partially, what I was thinking is that that would be the case, and you will go back to the best player gets the gets the award rather than the best team with the best player on the best team. We're starting to see that drift of that like the last year or two, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I think some of it's been like the last couple of teams that have won titles haven't necessarily been like super QB centric, right? So that's probably a function of that. Um, but yeah, so I thought about him. I thought about Dylan Gabriel. Really, and I could still see him winning it, but to me, it would be more of like a lifetime achievement award than it would be like, okay, he's actually like a dynamic. It's just like, all right, you've been in college football forever. You've been reasonably successful, and now you're with a team that, again, I think I told you, I think is probably 11-1, maybe 10-2 at the worst, and undefeated at best. Like, um, and so if everything breaks right for the Oregon Ducks, like he could be on it, but I still would be like, I don't, in my own personal opinion, feel like he is likely to be the catalyst for them going that 12-1. I think they could probably do a pretty good job with the backup there. So I've taken big swings and I've had lots of big misses. Maybe I take a big swing and this year I connect and just don't pull it foul. Just keep it between the foul poles. I'm gonna go. I'm big on Tennessee. I'm there. Give me Nico. I think that they can really do some stuff. I think they've got a pretty special group of receivers. I think that they've got enough on the offensive line to protect him. And I think like if you're going 10-2, that means you're probably beating. You play Georgia, you play Bama, you play Oklahoma. You're in enough games where you're going to get some visibility. That you win one or two of those ones, you're going to get a lot of a lot of kind of name recognition from that. So I'm going with Nico. I'm rolling the dice here a little bit, but Heupel has done nothing but just results. Like the man just gets results, and I think it's time that one of his players gets rewarded if they do have those same results. So I'm going big here, and mostly I think it's because like of the major contenders, like again, I don't expect Carson Beck to be throwing the ball around the yard a whole bunch. I don't expect uh, Will Howard at Ohio State to really do that. Same with Dylan Gabriel. Ewers is the one, like if you're going to pick sort of a front running team, that would be the QB that's probably going to be like most closely associated with their success. I just question whether or not I got them at like 10-2, maybe 9-3. I think that
You
they
just said
some
10-2 was good enough for Tennessee, though.
I mean, that's true. That is true. I'm just like, I don't know. I think that Ewers is Nico's like a bright shiny new thing, right? Like
That's a
Ewers
valid.
Ewers had the hype 2 years ago, and if he'd have done it 2 years ago, then we maybe are having a different conversation. I think that he's going to have to reclaim some of that luster. That
Expectations definitely play into it because that's why we don't
yeah,
see multiple Heisman's repeating ever.
for sure, for sure. So yeah, I know it's not a perfect. You talk a little bit out of both sides of your mouth. Um, cool, man. I have some picks against the spread. You
I've
talked
got
about
three
like,
as well.
hey, never do it, and I never actually like throw money on the line. Let me make that clear. But I love trying to pick them.
All right, I've got three. How many do
You
you
got
have?
three? Okay. I have. Sorry, let me look. Something similar to that. It's like 4 or 5, somewhere in that ballpark. Let me just get it in front of me. Yeah, I've got 4.
All right, why don't you go off and I'll follow you.
Okay. Virginia Tech at Vanderbilt. They're only 13.5 point favorites. I like them to cover that on the road. Doesn't matter. Go Hokies.
That one scared me. I stepped away from that one.
Oh, okay. All right.
You want me to go
Am I
next?
am I going all of them or are we
I don't care
alternating?
either way.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll go next. Miami minus 2.5. I think again, I'm all in on the Canes, and that probably means they're going to just crumble. Like the house of cards is just going to come tumbling down. I just like I don't see many matchups in this game where Florida has an advantage, right? The one thing that I think it could be interesting, and I doubt they do this week one of his true freshman year, but DJ Lagway is a pretty special player. And so I think they'll have like a package for him, but I don't think he'll play more than maybe like 5 snaps. But if he's dynamic on his first couple, maybe you just, you know, you ride that and see what you got. But I'm with the Hurricanes. I'm all in on them. I drafted them. I trust them to my peril with Mario Cristobal as the head coach. But there's my second pick. You ready for my third?
Hmm.
Okay, Boise State goes on the road at Georgia Southern. That's a long travel. Again, and maybe I'm being influenced by a couple of games this weekend where like the clock just continued to run and it was short. But I have Boise State, Georgia Southern going under 56 and a half total points. I think, yeah, so Boise State's going to run the football. Ashton Jeanty is a really, really good running back. Georgia Southern, uh, I think they'll also try and shorten the game. So I've got that under, and I do have Georgia Southern covering the spread too.
So that one actually intrigued me. I was thinking about that as well because just the fact that Malachi Nelson did not win the starting position for Boise State kind of tells you like, all right, well, you had a good player move in, and you couldn't even have him take the quarterback position. Um, my picks this week, I'm a big Oregon fan. I think Oregon's a really good team. With the shortened clock, it makes these big blowouts hard to handle. But I can't imagine Oregon not blowing Idaho out. So give me them to cover the 43.5. Like, I mean, that's a big number, but I still think
Yeah,
it's big enough.
yeah, maybe that's the part. I was a little nervous on like picking like big favorites because again, maybe it's like again the small sample size of week 0 is looming too large in my head, and it's like, man, these games can go by so quick.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you're scoring every couple of drives or every couple of plays, maybe it doesn't go that fast. So that was the other thing. Sorry, I did have one more. I
Okay.
miscounted. LSU USC over 64 points total. Like,
It's only 64.
it's 64. Yeah, I think it started a lot higher. I think it's been bet down, which to me, this is where they didn't build a bunch of towers in the desert for nothing. I'm a sucker. I think there's just no way those defenses slow down those two offenses. So I'm probably playing right into Vegas's hands, but I'm not playing actually at all. So that's where it's fun to play it and be like, I think there's going to be some points in that one.
Yeah,
Anyway, keep going.
I like that. I like you. I kind of wanted to bet one of the bigger games and stuff like that, and so I'm picking Penn State to cover against West Virginia. I do think West Virginia brings a lot. That line scares me. I think last time I saw it was 8.
8. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it started off at 10.5, and it's been bet down. So,
Interesting.
but give me Penn State to win. Drew Aller just doesn't turn over the ball, and if you can score 25, 20, 28 points, I think your defense will be good enough to keep you in that game. So.
To cover the 8 points.
Cover the 8, yeah.
Okay, nice.
So, and then last but not least, because Mark's not here, one of us has to be excited about Iowa. No, I'm just kidding. Like, I'm just kind of interested to see what happens with a new offensive coordinator. Iowa put up big points in their first few games last year, and then kind of trickled back to how we expected them to be. You're playing Illinois State. You're favored to win 22.5. Your defense might get you that. I mean, let's be real. Your defense is that good,
True.
and always it seems to be. The punt return seems to be that good. I can't see a way that Iowa doesn't score more than 22 points. It feels like a lot of recency bias on the fact that you had an old OC and a team that couldn't score. And this is a different team, in my opinion. I expect to see that. So give me Iowa to cover it as well.
Nice. Well, yeah, we'll follow along. From last week, I am 2-0 picking against the number right now. I had Georgia Tech covering the spread, and I had the under, and both hit.
Yeah, I think I'm 1-1 because I only
Yeah,
speak for
yeah. So we'll keep a running tally of that for those playing along at home.
History-wise, Steve's always wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Like play against me, and you're guaranteed to make money. You probably won't make a ton, but you'll probably make. You're not going to be on the opposite side. Although keep in mind, like we usually just kind of pick against the number with like no thought to like if there's some sort of like especially like if there's like adjusted odds, like you'll have to do your homework on that. So anyway. I don't have any parting shots because I feel like we fired them all off. But if
I'll
there's
give a
anything
parting
from you,
shot.
let's do it.
Week 0, Corey, you are stupid. You made a bad call. You deserve the comments that you're getting.
Well, I'll go ahead and make this into a short and tag all those people hating on your pick.
That's fine.
All right. Well, we'll sign off. Excited to get it really started, and especially excited for a 3-day weekend. Like, woo! Boy, do I need it. So, yeah, we'll keep it. Keep locked on our socials. Feel free to like, follow, share, and all the
dislike. We don't
all
care.
the good things or anything. Yeah. All right. We'll see you next week.
Peace.